William Wallace. His name stands as a beacon of rebellion. But what truly drove this man, a man of some status, not a peasant as many believe, to defy one of the most powerful empires in history? What inner strength carried him through personal tragedy, crushing defeat, and ultimately martyrdom for a cause greater than himself? This is the story of a man whose legacy was carved into the soul of a nation, but at a devastating cost. And in that cost lies a lesson for us all. In 1286, the death of Alexander III plunged Scotland into darkness. Edward I, Longshanks of England, sensing weakness, tightened his grip on the nation. By 1296, the streets of Scotland echoed with the clanking of English armor. It wasn't just military occupation, it was domination. Every clatter of steel boots on cobblestone was a reminder of subjugation. The air was thick with fear, and people lived under the constant shadow of humiliation. Taxes bled them dry, but far worse was the degradation inflicted by the soldiers who patrolled their towns. The brutalization of women became a tool of control, a way to break the spirit of the nation. The cries of the violated daughters and wives were left unanswered by any law, for the law itself had become the weapon of the oppressors. Imagine living in this world, a place where every sunset brought with it the possibility of a knock on the door, where no family felt safe. William Wallace was no stranger to this oppression, but it wasn't until the murder of his wife, Marion Braidfute, that his world was irrevocably shattered. Marion, the light of his life, had been his refuge in a world filled with injustice. Her presence had given him hope amidst the growing darkness of English tyranny. But that hope was cruelly torn away in an act of unimaginable brutality. Marion's death was a symbol of the unrelenting oppression every Scot faced under the English. Her murder was the final, unforgivable act of tyranny, one that would ignite a rebellion the likes of which Scotland had never seen. Wallace rose from Marion's side with a heart hardened by grief and a soul ignited by fury. The English had unleashed something far more powerful than they could have ever imagined. It was in this visceral, raw moment that William Wallace ceased to be a mere man. He became something else. His thoughts burned with questions. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? The nights that followed Marion's murder were sleepless, haunted by the images of English soldiers parading through their streets, emboldened by their unchecked power. Every breath Wallace took felt suffocating, the weight of tyranny pressing down on his chest. He had no choice. He knew the price of rebellion. He knew it would cost him his life. But what was a life worth if lived in chains? Wallace began his rebellion not with speeches, but with action. He and a small band of loyal Scots took to the Highlands, striking at the English under the cover of darkness. The scent of wet earth and pine filled the air as they moved silently through the forests. Their every step deliberate, every strike calculated. Wallace's mind was sharp, his rage channeled into precision. The English soldiers woke to find their supply lines burned, their camps reduced to ash. Wallace could smell the smoke, feel the heat of the fires as they devoured the enemy's stores. The English would feel the fear that they had inflicted on his people. Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. Wallace spoke these words not to inspire reckless courage, but to confront his men with the stark truth. He knew what lay ahead. The stakes were life or death, freedom or subjugation, and there could be no middle ground. By September 1297, Wallace's rebellion reached a critical point. Stirling Bridge. The English forces, far outnumbering Wallace's, approached with arrogant confidence. The air was thick with tension as Wallace watched from his position, hidden from sight. The rhythmic clanking of English armor, the rumble of hooves, and the steady march of soldiers across the narrow bridge over the River Forth. It was as though time slowed. Wallace could feel the beat of his own heart. the weight of his decision heavy in the pit of his stomach. But there was no turning back. When the moment came, it was like a storm unleashed. Wallace gave the signal, and his men descended upon the English with fury. The clash of steel against steel echoed through the valley. Wallace himself fought at the front, his sword slicing through the chaos, the smell of blood mixing with the damp earth beneath their feet. The river Forth turned crimson, its waters churning with the bodies of fallen English soldiers. The air was filled with the cries of the dying, the roar of the battle, and the sound of victory. This was more than just a tactical triumph. It was a message, a declaration to the English that Scotland would not be ruled by fear. But victory would not be his constant companion. The year was 1298, and Wallace faced his greatest challenge yet, the Battle of Falkirk. As the sky darkened with a hailstorm of English arrows, Wallace could feel the weight of inevitability. His carefully laid plans crumbled as his men fell around him. The sounds of arrows whistling through the air, the thud of them embedding into flesh, the cries of his men as they were cut down. It was total chaos. Wallace's mind raced, his heart pounded with desperation as he watched his dream of freedom slip through his fingers. In the aftermath of Falkirk, Wallace's thoughts turned inward. He retreated into the highlands, haunted by failure. Had it all been for nothing? He wondered as he sat in the cold night by the fire, the wind howling through the mountains like a dirge for the fallen. The faces of his men, of Marion, of every person who had died under English rule, haunted him. But in that darkness, his resolve only hardened. He knew now more than ever that his cause was just, even if the cost was everything. Then came the ultimate betrayal. In 1305, Wallace was captured, not by an Englishman, but by a fellow Scot, a bootlicker, Sir John de Menteith. The sting of betrayal was sharper than any blade. Wallace, bound in chains, was dragged to London to face trial for treason, but even in chains his spirit was unbroken. I could not be a traitor to Edward, for I was never his subject, he declared, standing before his captors. His voice rang through the court like a final strike of defiance. Wallace knew what awaited him, a brutal death, but he also knew that his death would be the spark that ignited a nation. The day of his execution came with the scent of death in the air. The jeers of the English crowd filled his ears, but Wallace stood tall. The pain was unimaginable. Hanged, drawn, and quartered, his body torn apart from every limb, but his spirit remained whole. As his dismembered remains were displayed as a warning to others, it only strengthened the resolve of the Scots. Wallace's life was one of unimaginable sacrifice. He lost everything: his family, his friends, his freedom, his life. But in losing it all, he gained something far greater: the undying love and respect of a nation. His fight was not for personal glory, but for the soul of Scotland and freedom itself. In the end, William Wallace's legacy transcends the centuries. His story stands as a testament to the timeless struggle for liberty, justice, and the indomitable human spirit. As we face our challenges and battles for freedom, we would do well to reflect on the lessons of this remarkable man, his unwavering courage, his refusal to submit to tyranny, and his willingness to sacrifice everything for a cause greater than himself. What will we do with the freedom and rights that others have fought and died for? How will we confront the forces of oppression and tyranny in our own time? The answers lie not in grand speeches, but in the quiet resolve of ordinary people to stand up and be counted. Wallace's life and legacy remind us that the fight for a better world is never truly over. The path he forged may be perilous, but it remains open to all who dare to walk it. If this exploration of William Wallace's life and legacy has inspired you, subscribe to War and Wisdom in History for more stories of those who fought for a greater cause. Let us know in the comments how the lessons of William Wallace's life can be applied to our own struggles today. We'll see you in the next chapter of history.